Yo, what's up guys? It's Yo Crypto here. In today's video, I'm breaking down 4 different builds based on how much you're spending in MapleStory and starting from full free to play all the way up to high spender. If you're not sure what kind of gear makes sense for your budget, this should help you figure out what to aim for and what's actually worth upgrading. Let's get into it. Now, I know you guys are going to ask me about Unchained Gear, and I'm going to tell you straight up that if you're going Unchained, you should pretty much only use this in the early game. Unchained Gear caps out pretty hard because you cannot get any flames on them, and enhancing them is extremely expensive. This makes them a suboptimal option if you're trying to clear endgame content, but it's excellent at the early game because you can start equipping it at level 30, and it scales hard into the mid game because you can start training at Star Force maps with them. If they were cheaper to enhance, I can see the argument being made for using them, but as they are right now, they are way too expensive to enhance and should be only used in the early game. So the first build I want to talk about, I am going to call the mud build, and the reason why I call this the mud build is because you are going through it, you are starting from the beginning. This is aimed for free-to-play players that is looking for the cheapest gear with the cheapest enhancement cost so they can maximize the early game to potentially do some of the weekly bosses. Okay, so the first item I want to talk about, and it's going to be the most important one, is going to be the weapon. This item is one that you get the most value out of right away because you can get to 10 stars very fast, and you can also get boss flames on this. So this is something you can work towards over 2 weeks. On top of that, this item is not too expensive on the market, so this is the most important item on the list right now. The other items I want to talk about are going to be the helmet, the shoes, the sub weapon, and the emblem. Okay, so the sub weapon is probably the next important item that you want to get. However, this one is more expensive, but you are able to get very good stats on this, such as boss damage, ignore enemy defense, and percent attack, making this an item that you pretty much keep forever. And the helmet and the shoes, the reason why these both are really strong options in the early game is because the enhancement costs on these are very cheap. They pretty much cost nothing to enhance them all the way to legendary when you compare them to the cost of every other item. Now, the emblem is out of most people's reach, but this is an item that you want to eventually work towards. There's really no good alternative out there. Like, if you can't get one, it is what it is. But as a free-to-play player, this is something that you will work towards over the span of months to try to eventually get one. Now the rest of the items are pretty much just filler items that I'm filling in to show you guys an example of what you guys can be working towards as a free-to-play player, right? So these are 2 rings that you guys can eventually pick up. The Neophyte accessories are all excellent options. However, there is one thing to note is that they are actually more expensive than some of the boss gear right now. So if you guys happen to want to invest into gear that is more future-proof, then the bossing gear is not a bad option. However, just know that the enhancement costs on the boss accessories, such as the rings, are going to be way higher than on the Neophyte accessories. So using the Neophyte set, you're essentially maximizing damage for enhancement costs. So just keep that in mind. However, over the long period of time, the boss set does edge out. Now, the last 2 items I'm going to talk about are going to be the overall and the gloves. These are not as important, but they just kind of round out the build. They can get boss flames on them. That means that they can get upgraded just a little bit to make yourself stronger. The gloves in particular can give you decent sharp eyes, making them very good. Now, what kind of content can you realistically expect to clear with all of this? If everything is legendary and maximized to its full potential, you can probably start to solo some of the harder bosses like Zakum, Easy Cygnus, and all the daily bosses will be really easy. But just keep in mind, this is when you're at the maximum build. That means every single item is maxed out with good potentials. On top of that, just know that with this build, these runs will be very long and very hard, like 28-minute Zakum runs, 20-minute Easy Cygnus runs. This is a build that caps out in damage, but it's very cheap to get. So the next build I want to talk about is going to be the Necromancer build, and this build is actually really similar to the previous one we just had. Essentially what we're doing is we're swapping out all of the cheaper gear for the Necromancer gear and give us a ton of damage to be able to clear harder content. The gear that we are essentially swapping out is going to be the weapon, the shoe, and the hat, and almost everything is basically the same. But for this build, we're essentially aiming for the whole Necromancer set so we can get 15% extra boss damage. And in particular, the weapon is actually really useful because this one goes up to 15 stars, giving you a lot of damage. Now, the Necromancer is also really cheap to enhance up to 10 stars. I also want to talk about that since we're using all the Necromancer set, you can also get boss flames on every single piece, which gives you additional damage on top of that. So this set I recommend for players that are looking for something that is more of a premium option than the mud build, but don't quite have enough for the next tier or anything more expensive. This build I would actually recommend for players that don't have too much funds but want to be able to clear some of the later game content. What kind of content can you expect to clear with this build? Well, this build with the upgraded weapon and with the flames on all the additional items such as the hat and the shoes, I think that you can realistically clear all the bosses up until normal Cygnus and even start duoing or trioing inside CRA. Now, as more damage does come out in other forms such as Legion or Lynx, this build can potentially even start to clear up to CRA. Now, the next set of items, and I want to call this one the standard, which is the Von Leon set build. This is the one I think that most players should be striving for because this one allows you to clear every single piece of content in the game right now. And the main difference for this build is that we're swapping out all of the Neophyte accessories with the boss accessories, and this gives us a ton more damage because all of the accessories can be flamed for additional damage. On top of that, the emblem gets swapped out for a gold emblem. The Von Leon set especially is strong because this set can go up to 20 stars, making it have a much higher damage potential than the Necromancer set. This is the build that you want to go for if you want to solo CRA, even up to Chaos Vellum, and you want to start doing Lotus and Damien in quads or maybe even trios. This build is very, very good for the amount of money you have to put in. However, just know that even with this build, you will be spending thousands of dollars on enhancements just to get to a place where you can do all that content. So this build is for players that are willing to spend more money, but they don't want to go the premium option. Now, the last build I'm going to talk about is going to be the CRA set, or this one is going to be for the players that are willing to spend on the best gear in the game right now. And most notably, I want to talk about some of the premium options that we have put on this build. And that is going to be the Dominator Pendant, the Black Beam Mark, and the CRA pieces getting swapped out from the Von Leon. This set is extremely future-proof because you are using some of the best items in the game, which is the CRA items, the Dominator Pendant, the Black Bean Mark. The belt is also really good. And this build, you can pretty much do every single piece of content in the game with ease, while also being future-proof. I do want to talk about some of the swaps that this build will eventually make, and that's going to be the weapon will eventually be swapped out for a Fafnir weapon, and the shoes, gloves, the cape, these will all essentially be swapped out for Absolute later in the future, especially once you're able to get the Fafnir weapon, because it gives you an additional 30% boss on the set bonus and 30% boss on the weapon. Now, who would I recommend this build for? I recommend this build for people that want to maximize their damage at the end game. These are for hardcore players that are looking to solo boss every single piece of content. And this build is extremely future-proof because once you make the upgrades, then you will have some of the best items that will pretty much last you forever. And that's it for today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and make sure to like, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.